Right. Makes sense. Then we're about 8 minutes out. So if you're watching this after the fact, feel free to roll forward 8 minutes, and that's when class will begin. Meantime, I'm gonna run down the hall real quick. All right. Oh, great. Yes, this is the chapter we're on. Ooh, double check I made the exam available. I did. Okay, cool. Had to check, make sure I made the exam available. My last class, they notified me. It's like, hey, when are you gonna make that exam available? Ooh, it was almost a week ago. I should open that up. No one told me in the meantime. I was glad they reminded me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have noticed it until probably tomorrow, which point in time. Like, like I am right now. I'm just let's see, things going on in here. Don't forget we have exam 2 due on the 30th. That's in a couple days. And we're gonna go rolling off into chapter 9. I was thinking we had already talked about some of this stuff, but I can't remember. So if you can, feel free to sound off and let me know if there's some of the stuff we talked about. Because I remember talking about proactive and reactive policing, crime control strategies, but I can't remember if that was in here or somewhere else or something of that nature. And we got 3 minutes though, so we'll pick up then. It's legally arrested. It's objectively arrested. Oh. Yeah, we'll get through this chapter pretty fast. This one's pretty straightforward. We'll probably spend a little bit of time kind of going off into um, I'm not familiar with the Kansas City gun experiment. I need to look at that one, but I'll talk about some of those things. So there's some sections on gangs, guns, and it seems gangs, guns, hate crime, and terrorism. And so we'll spend a bit of time talking about each of those things. Oh my goodness, I need coffee. Oh boy, do I need coffee. But such is life. Let's see. 1 minute. Then we'll get rolling. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 people here, so including me. No one physically here, but that's okay. You know, if I could get my one of my other morning classes to decide that they all want to be through Zoom, I guess I wouldn't be physically in this room for this class either. But I'd need at least one more to do that because this one's right in the middle of 3 of my classes. This is my middle class. It's like, I'm already here. But there are worse. I like being here. There are worse places to be. All right, so let's see. All right, it is officially 10 a.m. All right. So, Mitt. Sure, that's going. Share the screen. Okay, shared my screen. Of course, now my list's went away. No, with the chat right there in front of everything. I want it right there. Right there. Cool. Okay. So, do not forget if you're just coming in that we have an exam to do on Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. So make sure you get that done. You take the quizzes before you do so. And let's see. What else? So I was thinking I'd already started some of the stuff last class. I can't remember if it was something I'd already looked at or if I'd looked at it recently or if it was something that I was talking about a similar topic in a different class because some of my classes they run a little parallel at times. So we start looking at crime control strategies. The biggest, no, I should say the biggest. One of the initial separations you can identify as proactive versus reactive. It's kind of a careful balance to keep in mind if you start doing too much proactive versus reactive. You want to be proactive, but you don't want to overstep boundaries or anything of that nature. You want to, it's a very, very difficult balance. Here it talks about proactive versus reactive. Just reactive is when it's at a citizen's request, proactive is when it's at police officer's own behest, their own self-initiated activities. Let's say, I don't know if self-initiated, that's what it could be. You could say self-initiated. General versus specific. When you start talking about general versus specific, you're talking about the crimes there and specific places, specific times, specific types of issues, specific vendors, maybe specific victimization, victim populations, that kind of thing. Like I think last time I may have given, maybe that wasn't in here. I don't know. I keep thinking it was. Probably the best example I had was lived in a big city, Little Rock, for a number of years. I've been there for a couple of years. They had a wave of car thefts that had started increasing. Basically, what happened is there are a few people that moved into the town that were known for basically being a roving gang of car thieves, that kind of thing. And so at that point, then you have a good idea of what's changed here. Your numbering in car thefts has jumped up. The only thing that's really changed is, hey, you got a few people who are known quantities that have moved into the area that relate directly to that. And so that would be one of those things like, okay, keep an eye on it. Yeah, so that's where you get to specifics more targeted, general is less so. Okay, mentions assumptions here. So when you start talking about crime control, like the crime control model, realize you're dealing with stuff that's this essentially. This is probably good to talk a little bit about it in here related to this class. That's the crime control model. You start getting into deterrence theory, classical theories, the Enlightenment period, the time frame in which this country was founded, which is why it takes a standpoint that it does, why deterrence theory is often lumped into like classical theories. It has to do time frame and time period and the ideas that were prevalent. Here, what it is it's acknowledging the fact that the police are that element, that deterring factor. Yeah. Entire criminal justice and society's primary mechanism what crime because it is. Big thing though is if you start looking at that, the effect that crime control actually has on crime, you're not dealing with the source, you're dealing with the effect. That's why it starts talking about the proact versus react. Here it mentions University of Maryland makes 2 important points by a report on crime prevention programs. Police are only one source of impacts on crime. You have a lot of different institutions. It's like the criticism about mental health institutions in the 1970s being defunded. And as they went away, policing started having more problems, right? That would be one of those, institutions that could have an impact. And one example, medical fields, that kind of stuff too. Emphasize the interdependence of different institutions because they all have to work together. Measuring effectiveness requires meaningful definitions and reliable data. Okay, so what they mean there, that's probably more on the you can say methodological side, that kind of thing. Whenever you start measuring effectiveness with what? The big problem with your traditional method measures like response times and things like that is, well, it's really good to have a short response time, but there are other factors in there too that play into response time. As just one example. There are many other examples of stuff like that. We start reliable data. That's going to be, but that's input too. If you really think about that, you have all the organizations. So I'm not going to talk about that. Just make sure that what you're doing is well defined, it makes sense, and you're actually doing it. Because that's basically what the methodological process does. It checks those things. Okay. Preventing crime. Here's where it talks about prevention units, meeting with citizens, working with neighborhood groups, and education. Because those are the big pointed areas that people tend to look for the applications for findings to be applied. Those are the areas right there for this kind of stuff. Second major crime fighting responsibility of police, apprehending criminals. So that's preventing crime and then apprehending criminals. I've highlighted that aspect about citizenry before. Citizens are the ones, they are every single element of this thing, from the police officers themselves to the criminals themselves. And so they're the ones who notify the police, they're the ones who provide the information, that kind of stuff. When it starts talking about unreported crimes, it has to do with the importance of the crime. They can't do anything about it. And sometimes it's because it might be the fact that there's other factors there, but do they even recognize that it was a crime kind of thing? I think of some of that evidence. It's like if you had your bicycle stolen, are you going to go and file a report on it? How much is the bike worth? Do you recognize the fact that it's no longer in your driveway or in your shed or wherever you have it? Right? If you don't know, you don't know anything about it. There's nothing to be done. That's one reason, and there are other reasons why too. On the official side, they have this thing called unfounding a crime. Right? This is when, hey, there's been encounters. Typically, anytime that you have a officer and citizen encounter, that typically are reports because you had some type of contact, depending on the nature of that contact, of course. But here we have failure to complete an official crime report when a crime was reported. You can have this. Sometimes it's downgrading. You might hear referred to as downgrading. So instead of it being, what would it be? Instead of breaking and entering, it's vandalism or something like that. It's a lower level, similar type of crime. Both of those affect the numbers. Both of those have, there are reasons why those things take place. Usually it's related to, a number of things, right? Politics is the big one because if you look at it, heck, I think it was just last week and you were talking about the fact that the UCR reporting scheme and results were both major subjects of political discourse in like last couple of weeks. It's like that's really not good. Like it's never good when it comes to crime, but yeah, that's really not good. That sounds for society. Here, reasons for unfounding a crime. Citizens do not understand the law. What that means is they can be convinced to not file a report. Right? That's kind of what you're doing there. A person wanted something, but you're talking of the otherwise because maybe they don't understand how the process works. Next one, really common. Insufficient evidence. There is just not enough here. Right? Yeah, your house got broken into, but you don't have a camera? No. No witnesses? No. Like shoe tracks, anybody? Nothing? Nothing. Okay, nothing's happening. We're not gonna worry about that one. Abuse of officer's discretion. That's the negative one. It's yeah. Whether it's for purposes of making something look different or any number of things, individual treatment, that kind of stuff. Yeah, not a good situation. All right, so here's where it starts to talk about investigations. So when we start talking about investigations, detectives, typically they start talking about glamour and glitz and that kind of stuff. They're commonly referred to as that. What would you say? Not department, in the glamour division. Something I forget exactly what the term was now. But yeah, here the work is exciting. It's a myth. Detectives are heroic, courageous, skillful. That's awesome. A good detective solve any crime. Harmful effects on the public. That's weird how they did that. The idea that a good detective can solve any crime, that's a myth. Those myths have harmful effects. They should have called that a little bit differently. Basically, what you start getting into is people who want to do the job that doesn't exist. It's a lot of report filing, a lot of tracking, a lot of counting, a lot of keeping up with every little detail you can. And here's something else that fits, and maybe it doesn't fit. And which puzzle are we trying to put together this time? That kind of thing. So because of that, you have that unreasonable expectation. Unreasonable expectations in terms of what's being done, what's possible to be done, how likely it is that that particular result that you want will actually be achieved. Any particular result you'd like to see will actually be achieved. Yeah. But because it's popular, It's popular everywhere. So patrol can be devalued, even though it's the bulk of it. Okay. Separate unit. Some as a detective is considered high status, opportunity to control one's work and exercise initiative. So that's the big thing. Is it lets you move away from shift work, that kind of thing. You have more control, more individual oversight. Still a lot of work. Offers great opportunity to control one's work. I've already said that. Offers a clearly defined measure of success. Did you arrest? What's your clearance rates? That kind of stuff. Hey, how many arrests? How many cases did you have? How many arrests? You got an arrest for that case? There you go. That's success right there. Here's going to move through the investigation process. So preliminary investigations, that's going to be stuff related to the scene, that kind of stuff. So that's all the stuff that happens on scene right there at the time things are taking place. Next thing we'll talk about is the decision whether or not to arrest. Whether you move into arrest, here it mentions the decisions based off of the following factors: strength of the evidence, seriousness of the crime, victim's request, relationship between the victim and suspect, and if there's any hostility, disrespect towards the officer, particularly on the part of the perpetrator, offender, kind of thing. First, keep in mind that whenever you look at the decision to arrest, if you have established probable cause in any way, that equals grounds to arrest someone, right? So as long as you have that probable cause for anything, there you go. Now, what they'll do is, depending on the type of incident you're encountering, it's going to require investigation. Yeah. Basically, what happens is at the point in time you have the ability to make an arrest, and when you do so, you're able to also perform a search incident to arrest. So at that point in time, if that person had anything on them that it's going to be evidence, that's a really strong reason to go after it, right? They're going to have evidence on them. Okay, let's make that arrest. Yeah. Follow up activities. 3 categories: routine activities, interviewing, checking scenes, that kind of stuff. Secondary, canvassing, interviewing witnesses, discussing the case, collecting physical evidence. Tertiary, discussing with the officers, interviewing suspects, informants, stakeouts, that kind of thing. Here it has a little bit where it says reality. There is no blamer. Superficial, routine, and non-productive. Yeah, boredom is the law of the land for most of these things. Talks about formal screening procedures based on case solvability factors. Basically, what they start doing is they look at the sums of the evidence available, the likelihood that it will lead to a conviction, and that's how they pronounce conviction. But well, it'd be the same kind of thing for conviction too. Essentially, you look at the factors associated with the case to determine which ones are associated with the highest, the more closely associated with those that are solved. Boom. Next one. Okay. Caseload has here broken into 3 components: nominal, workable, and actual. Right. Nominal, anything under the nominal, that means in name only. Workable means those are ones that could be solvable. Actual caseload, what you're actually doing. That reminds me of me sometimes. There's what I could be doing. There's what I should be doing, and then there's what I'm actually capable of doing. Right? And that's for everybody. And so it's kind of a good way to keep that in mind. Nominal's name, workable is solvable, and actual is what you're really working. Clearance rates. Here's where you get to that. Traditional measure of success is 20%. Unreliable because you have all reporting issues. You have different criteria for determining when something's clear, that kind of a thing. Because this decentralized nature of it. And then right here mentions data can be manipulated. We've already mentioned a couple of ways that can happen very easily, right? We can move those numbers up or down just by deciding whether or not we're going to count them or count them as something a little bit less or a little bit more. So we can play with those numbers. People do. It's wrong to do so. They do it anyway. And so that's always going to be up to some degree. Is there anything else I want to say? That 20% cleared rate nationally. That's one of those things that's always good to keep in mind, because if you look at it, even for homicide, like the first degree, I want to say the probability is only 50%. And so if you had a coin on you, can I get away? That kind of thing. Another one that makes me think of are and since Ken's coming up, I'll come up in a second. Accuracy. Whenever you fire a weapon, accuracy drops sort of like that. To where if you're under stress, that kind of thing, firearms accuracy, I think, what did they say? It was something like under stress. Was it 80-20? Like 80% of shots missed, 20% actually hit the target, but most of them are not going to be counted against something that incapacitates somebody. That kind of thing. When they start talking about clearances and that kind of stuff, they're moving to arrests, because that's one way of defining clearance. And so when you look at arrest, they list here 4 different dimensions. Now, again, realize that there's different ways to break this thing up. So I'll offer a different one that's not necessarily competitive with this, but will align with this, because there's this, and then there's like the legal aspect of it, which you should be kind of familiar with it too. So that first one, legally arrested. What it means is you have had some deprivation of your rights. Right? What else do I want to say about that? Legally arrested. Technically, if you get into it, it's your right to move, right? You're no longer free to leave. You have to stay right there. You're frozen. Behaviorally, subjectively, and efficient, right? So when we start talking about arrest, legal, behavioral, subject. Pardon me. I need more coffee. I've been up since 10 o'clock last night, something like that. Got some stuff done though. Okay. Basically, what you start getting at here is this gives you behaviorally arrested. Legal is just simply there's been some type of deprivation. Here is an arrest. From a legal standpoint, when you start looking at that behaviorally arrested, when you establish that in court, those things are essentially the same thing, right? You've established that. In fact, they were deprived of it. So yes, this behavior itself is an arrest. When it gets into arrests, the 2 types that they talk about are actual and constructive. Actual being this one right here to some degree. Constructive kind of aligns with the way that they have subjective, right? Whether or not you believe you're free to go. I'll talk about that in a second. Officially arrested is when it's reported. That's when it goes into the system, right? So there's different thresholds here. When I start talking about subjective arrests, the lesson there is actual versus constructive seizures. Actual seizure, a person here, so I'm grabbing it. That's an actual seizure I'm holding on to. Constructive seizure, or the subjective one, how you get through that would be like, okay. If I ask you to stop, say, I don't even ask if I just make it declarative, assume, hey, stop right there. You do. That is a constructive seizure. It's subjective in nature. Behavior, though, is functionally an arrest and it is legal. Right? And so basically we start dealing with there is, would you be able to make the determination as to whether or not you're seized? And that's something that the reasonable person would make that determination. So the average person in that situation. So there's some math involved. Basically what that means is that you think you're under arrest, you might as well act as such. And then if you act as such, you're basically over here in most instances. Yeah, that you're understanding it to be, you can be here, or you can be way off and still be free to go, and it'd be just consensual. And that's one of those things that which reality you exist in is not one that you yourself can make that determination. It takes 12 people, however many months or years later down the line, to make that determination for what is reasonable, what the average person would expect, and whether or not everyone's behavior is not pleasant, kind of thing. And so that's a little bit of how the arrest stuff works. Right? So you have these different ways of looking at it. Are you legally arrested? Yes or no? Behaviorally. Yeah, I behaviorally arrested this person. They were not legally arrested. That was an illegal, invalid arrest. Right? They were subjectively arrested. They believed it themselves, but no reasonable person would think that. See? So those things can work contradictory to each other. Next up, I want to talk about solving cases in investigation. All right. 3 solvability factors, structural factors. The case, the case itself. Organization. How many people you got as detectives? How many people are doing this kind of job? What sure, that kind of stuff. Resources, that kind of thing. Third one, environment. Mentions your communities. Like I said earlier, citizens are your source for everything. How many citizens in the area are willing to give you the information you need to be able to solve this case? Ooh, sometimes it's a good number, sometimes it's not. Here's what goes into productivity. So some detectives make more arrests than others, quality differs, and some don't lead to a conviction. We have to talk about that so much. Usually in some of these police textbooks, at some point they'll have a section that talk about what's the phrase? Basically, like rate busters is what I'm thinking. If you had a certain rate that was kind of expected within an area, you get someone new in there, and they're just cleaning up. Like, if everyone here's rate is X number of arrests per month, this person's 3 times over that. Yeah, that's not a good thing. So you have differences there. You have differences in individual detective abilities too. Here mentions case attrition. So detectives express little interest in the performance measure associated with low attrition rates. Yeah, that don't like attrition. Here's where it starts getting into a little bit of the evidence side. So this is well, I'll tell you about this because it's either go to the evidence side and go to the science side. We'll go with starts with eyewitness identification. So the first thing it mentions there is human perception and memory. It's almost like a preview for something we talk about in evidence today. So in evidence, we're talking about eyewitness identification. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. The first thing I want people to understand is how seeing works. You don't. You see what you want. And that's like most things. Um, hmm. So if I asked you all your, what would be a good example? Good way of phrasing. Parts, parts of memory, right? So if you start thinking about how your memory works and how we perceive things, if you pick either end, input, output, kind of thing, one you have to realize it's like everyone knows long term versus short, but there's also what is it? Something like working memory. So this is the stuff that's actively in your mind at any one given point in time. Sort of like RAM is for a computer. Huh? And then you have uh, actual sensory input here, right? Actually, stop this for a quick second so you can see this a little bit better because it's probably real hard to see for you at the actual forward. We'll stop for a second. So if you start thinking about memory, it's like there's more than just this, but this will kind of get the example it prompts, right? So you'd have your long term, your short term, your working memory, and then you have everything that's in the world trying to get in, right? Um, when everything's trying to get in, you're actively focusing in on stuff and tuning out others, right? For me in the room, it's how many chairs are in the room, how many seats are turned which direction, that kind of stuff. It's a whole bunch of sensory input in here. None of it's really useful, so I tune it out, right? If it was focused in on something related to what I'm doing, it'll matter and it will go in. Working memory, that's sort of like an audio loop kind of thing. Not necessarily audio loop, can be images too. Basically, this is your active thought process. You ever had something that's extremely conscious and not necessarily thinking ahead? That whatever it is that they're actively doing, that's what's in their working memory. You'll have another filter here into your short-term memory, right? If you remember, if you've taken psychology, you'll know that your short-term memory is this right here. Only 7 plus or minus 2. So you went from everything in the world to everything that's actively in your mind right now to your short-term memory of 7 digits plus or minus 2 for most people. See how quickly we narrow down and tune things out. Eyewitnesses are a key example for this. That's 7 plus or minus 2. That's why we have telephone numbers that are 7 digits. If you're not counting area code, of course. But there's a lot of reasons why we use that. That's long-term memories, not necessarily like this, but it takes a lot more work to get at. That kind of thing. If I remember all that correctly, it's been 2 years since I read into that stuff. But each one of these will have a filter. You know, that phone number that you were repeating. Hey, guess what? You don't need to repeat it so much anymore because it's just kind of stuck in there for a few minutes. It's going to stay in there. Is it going to be 3 weeks later? You're going to be like, I remember that number. Right? It'd be like asking you, how many of you can recite one of your friend's telephone number from when you were in grade school, that kind of thing. Some people will be able to. Not everyone, but that's the thing with memory, right? You only remember what you want to as best as you remember it. Witnesses here are wrong at least 37% of the time. I could show you videos where you can see just how awful it is, how little attention people pay. And that's before it was an older video before everybody had their face in their phone. Right. And so if you think about it, you're gonna have people around. What's the odds that what are the odds that they're gonna have their face in the screen at the time something dangerous is happening? Ooh, very, very high. We start moving to criminalistics. Here's where we're trying to apply the scientific method to physical evidence. So basically tech specialists starting a little bit like forensics, that kind of thing. Moves into DNA next. DNA, there's a few different ways that they test it. Actually, more and more ways all the time. I'll tell you about some of the old ones first, and I'll tell you about some of this other stuff too. They'll identify the two databases here that have DNA that's for query. That's the National DNA Indexing System, Forensic Index Data, and Convicted Offender Index. So we can check those who have been convicted of certain crimes, and then any crimes that are unsolved, they'll have a database for people to check against for new crimes, that kind of thing. So I would certainly cross, reference those informations. Let's see, forensic idea. Yeah, I just stopped down those types of things. So I'll talk a little about DNA real quick. So originally, probably one of the cooler experiments I've ever seen would be you guys have probably seen, I'd have to look it up. I don't know if I can find a good picture of it. The old DNA segments, like we would see, I will see. I can't find them. We'll see. So I'll tell you how that works because it's actually pretty cool. DNA. What's the picture? No. Oh, DNA. Matching. That's not going to give any good pictures. That's a shame. Ooh, this one almost has it. Let me show you this. Here. Share here. Share. Yes, share. Yeah. So right here, you see how this DNA right here has the darker squares that are overlapping with the lighter ones. Basically, what happened there was that was one of the old ways they used to analyze DNA. Very simple. Basically, what it was is you get your DNA sample, and then you would basically have a tray. You have multiple points where you're dropping DNA. And then this matrix it's in, what they do is they literally just run electricity through it. By running electricity through it, the polarity of it causes it to move. The bits of DNA that are shorter in length move farther out. And so as it does that across the matrix it's in, it pulls it across to where you can have basically a pattern like what you saw there, where it's here's this line, this section's thicker here, lighter here, thicker here, and it'll work like that across all the entries, all the what's the word? Strains. Functions. There you go. And so that's how those used to work. Now what they do is they do that still, but now there's more stats involved in that kind of stuff there too. I think last I heard, so it used to be what they would do is you'd have a sample from the scene, you have a sample from your suspect, and whenever you compare them, what you're doing was either ruling out or not ruling out the defendant. So it was a way to kind of start here. Now what it does is it identifies the defendant. So that's ideally. if you're doing it right, identifies the defendant. Unless you got the wrong suspect in the wrong person, that person actually isn't. Or there's something else afoot. So these were not very accurate. The old styles, like that one's just kind of a master shapes kind of thing. The older styles, though, we start talking about 1 in a million versus 1 in 100,000 versus 1 in 10,000. Those are wildly different numbers, and people don't really understand that. So if you have a jury that's, well, I guess I could say, expert witness would be willing to overstate the interpretation there. That's something the jury wouldn't necessarily pick up on. You have some problems there, but that's a different class. We won't talk about that too much. Yeah. Now what they do is the same kind of things. They add in polymerase that they repeatedly sample it for basically increase the numbers, and so that way they can really highly assess how close of a match it is to it. All right, improving criminal investigations. I mentioned structural, procedural changes, and functional changes. Okay, so here's where it's showing the community policing. That's kind of a change in topics. I wish I would preface these a little bit more. Okay, so when we start talking about community-oriented policing, I've told you a little about the history of it related to the 1970s, the Nothing Works era, and then movement back towards it. But when we start looking at it, ooh, I need to set an assignment for this because this is one of my favorite ones. What exactly is it? What does it do? I may have mentioned it here before. For a lot of departments, that's equivalent to foot patrol or something like that. They're doing something very, very minor just to say that they're doing it because there are federal dollars attached. If you read the original writings related to it, you will see the difference between that and what was being proposed. What was being proposed addresses multiple levels, while foot patrol just had one element. And so that's one of those things that here it mentions major changes that are from community-oriented policing. That's why. Structural changes, because if you're doing it right, what it will do is it will flatten out your administrative structure, because the whole point is to be ingratiated with the community itself. And procedural changes, basically start doing with this increasing discretion, increasing the number of people involved in, and then here it says functional changes related to role and responsibilities because of that increased community time. Next up moves into undercover work. Too far. So here's where I start talking about drugs, guns, and sex. Number of special problems for police. Deliberate deceptions may promote a habit of lying. And you befriend criminals. Can't erode the standards of policing. And then you have everything associated with being outside of the purview of others. Outside of the purview of others, when you might quite literally know that you're going to be walking into a situation where you're going to be committing criminal actions, right? And so that's a very, very, very difficult thing. Let's see here. Anything I want to say about that? Yeah. In 4 minutes. I'm gonna have to go after this one. Quick break and see about coffee or something. But not too long. Only had 3 cups of coffee today. And yesterday. Wednesday and yesterday. Informants. So we start dealing with informants, realize that there's a lot of different situations in which informants can come up. The big thing to be aware of is who's informing you and what they're informing you of, right? So if you're going to use it for investigative work, it needs to be something corroborative in nature, so that way you can determine whether or not it is a good tip, right? When you start using that, though, it's the same problem you had before. You might develop friendships or other types of relationships there that ooh, may not be appropriate, right? They want something. Is it money? Is it related to some of their own charges? That kind of stuff. Who knows? Lists out a few different types of informants. All right. Drugs are left at drugs, gangs, guns, and hate and terrorism. So that's too much to cover the rest of today. We will pick up with drugs next class. I think that's what we'll do. Because what we'll start doing is we'll talk about, of course, the drug crime loop kind of thing. It's one of those things that yes, there are causal directions, both the directions, but just what it is it's a cycle. Doesn't really matter what enters; they both come together usually. That kind of a thing. Yeah. So we'll talk about strategies, things that have been done. When it says Norris and war on drugs, we'll talk about that. And then we'll probably move into gangs and then guns and then terrorism. Because I think this would be a good one to start, then move into gangs because there'll be an overlap there. Talk about the relationship between gangs and drugs. What's interesting there is the fact that historically gangs are seen as the major drug distributors or major ways to make money within gangs is in the drug market. And that is usually not the case. It's usually not enough money for, for those who are actually selling drugs to make it. The handful of people at the top, of course, they make out bandits. But with that, we will call it a day. We will pick up on Wednesday. And if you need anything or have any questions, just let me know. Take care and have a great day. Bye. Hey, off. Bye.